Otherwise, we're going to lose a ton of people. Welcome everybody to UFO Man Live. We're running a little bit late this evening due to the fact that we're still waiting on our guest. He's running a little bit late and said that he is coming. So hold your drinks, whatever you got, pretzels, whatever. He'll be here shortly. I want to introduce my panel. I've got Nos.
Greetings.
I got Polly Rodeman all the way from Israel.
Hello, everyone.
I've got Odessa down in the corner, who's been missing from our panel for quite some time. We want to welcome her back.
Good to be back.
And we've got Nancy Timms down in the right corner.
Hello.
Super popular podcaster. Got to give her that credit. And the fact that she's working always within multiple groups on Facebook. So give her a lot of credit for that. We are going to discuss a topic until our guest gets there. All right, Nos, let's start with a topic that you would like to discuss.
Well, there are so many ways that we can go with it. The big thing surrounding disclosure, and all of us have participated in interviews with witnesses over these recent years. People who are across every different piece of the spectrum of experience. People who are having abduction experiences, people who are experiencing visions and dream sequences that are realer than real, or people with implants, and people that are looking to study the machines that are out and about doing their work. And, whenever we encounter the people that have been driven to be involved in this search for truth to the point where we're interacting with them, they seem to have found that no matter which direction they started with their research, they arrived at the same conclusion that something big is coming, and it's got something to do with the consciousness of humanity as a whole.
Yeah.
Right. And every time we go out there and we look at these, struggle for disclosure, the work that LUE Elizondo and people like him have been doing, trying to get the government to take responsibility for pulling back the reins on what's going on. And when it comes down to it, this struggle with the government, with moves and counter moves on disclosure, is about the disclosure of an elite power that has the ability to pull strings within every military department of the US government, with every bit of US int, and even in the halls of Congress. They can just misappropriate hundreds of millions of dollars of funds that are intended to legitimately be put to research on this off to something else. Congress made their decision. It's supposed to go to this. Blue talks about it in his book. And these people just, it doesn't matter. The constitutional rule of law is out the window. And Lou and people like him have been fighting to have the government take responsibility for at least disclosure of who the people are that are responsible for hoarding celestial knowledge and technology. Because that's what this is about. The disclosure
Right.
fight with Washington, D.C. isn't about celestial knowledge. It isn't about technology. It's that there is this elite force that has been operating, controlling this behind the scenes, and just knowing it is happening in the most powerful government on earth, and the people that are supposed to be making decisions are having their decisions overridden by someone that doesn't show up on any records anywhere.
Right.
That's the struggle. That's the disclosure war that's going on, is just who's responsible for hiding the truth, and can we have a path to it?
No,
And-
hold on, because Lou sent a message here in the. Hold on. Okay. No, nothing. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Well, the message is.
He says he's backstage. Is that possible?
Wow.
He says he's backstage.
Look in the private chat for a second.
Mine in the private chat
I
doesn't
don't
show.
see anything in the private chat.
No, there's nothing in
Nope.
private chat.
I don't see anything in private chat either.
Oh, he in the YouTube. He said he's in the StreamYard link you sent him. He might actually be over in the previous one.
Okay, well, I
I
just
need the
sent.
new StreamYard link.
Tell him I just sent him the new link.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, he can hear you just the same as I can right now. Jeff.
Okay, Lou, I sent you the new link. It's in an email. Go ahead and grab the email and click on the link. You'll be here shortly.
Yeah.
Just a little mix-up on my part. We'll have him here shortly.
Yep.
The man of the hour, Lou Elizondo.
Absolutely.
So glad
Can't wait.
we're gonna have him here.
Yeah,
He has been working his tail off on this disclosure.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure,
transparency, yes.
And
sure
if
people have
we
questions,
if we want to have the truth about the celestial knowledge and technology that's being hidden, first we need the truth about who's hiding it. That's how you unlock those doors. And that's what he's been working on this whole time.
One way that you can find out about his information is to go to Amazon and pick up his book Imminent, Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
It's like $17. It's some change just
Great
for the
book.
hardcover book. That's a good deal. Go in and read it. It has so much information. The information you think that he's been withholding all this time is actually within this book. So please go out and pick it up.
He says he has the link from last night. Is there a new one?
The one I just sent him should end
In
in
the
the
email.
letters DE.
So sorry about the technical difficulties, everybody, but we'll get it
wait a
together.
minute. Wait a minute. No, he's right. He's right. Hold on. I'll go and get it. I'm wrong.
Just copy it straight from our StreamYard address bar. That way you'll know it's
I'm wrong. I'm getting it.
incoming, Lou.
It's coming. I agree, Esme. The book is great. Esmeralda, it's awesome. Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's right here.
It's the one that I sent with the last three letters are BDE. So if you got that one, I'll send it to you again, Lou. Just hold on.
Drums.
Right. Drum roll.
It'll be to you in a second here.
He is a good sport.
Yeah, he's a very good sport.
Okay, he says, I am in.
He's in.
Let me in.
Ah, yes.
Let me in.
Yes.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm lost here. Hold on. Oh, Is he already backstage?
Yeah, he's
he's in
backstage.
private chat here. It says he's in backstage.
Okay, hold on a second here. What's going on?
Technical difficulties. Something's wrong with the
I'm having
computer.
technical difficulties.
Yep.
Okay, I see him. Oh, there he is. Whoa, whoa,
Wow.
whoa.
Hi, guys.
Good spot. Oh, my
Hi.
God. Yeah.
Boy, I tell you, I've taken over countries with a lot less trouble than that before.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Wow.
Good to have you.
Well,
Yeah.
it is my sincere honor and
Welcome.
privilege.
It's good to have you back on the channel. We are live, so everyone, please welcome with a hearty hello, Lou Elizondo, back to our channel.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome,
You
welcome.
made it.
Truly my honor and privilege. Thank you so much. I'm very sorry for the technical difficulties. I guess I had an old link, and I was sitting there, and then I started seeing you all come on. I'm like, oh no, what's going on? I've been frozen out in the
Yeah.
cold.
My fault. Sorry about
but,
that, Lou.
No, it's okay. I just hope you all don't think I was, ignoring you. I wanted to
No,
do
God,
this.
no.
This is important to me because it's important to you. There's a lot of things happening right now behind the scenes that I can't wait to, talk to you a little bit about.
Okay.
I think there's a lot going on right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Besides your book, we'd like to hear what's going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
In regards to the panel, I want to introduce my panel to you.
Okay, great.
Lou, we have Polly Rotterman all the way from Israel.
Hi, nice to meet you.
She is an investigative journalist and an ET researcher.
Wonderful.
We have Nos. She is a celestial historical researcher.
Fantastic.
That is the best description for
It's a good one.
I love that.
We also have Odessa, who controls the chat room, because without her, I couldn't do it. And Nancy Timms, she is a prolific podcaster within the realm of consciousness, connecting to the ET UFO phenomena.
Fantastic. Well, again, it is my honor and privilege to be with you folks. Thank you so very much. I hate plugging myself. So unless you ask me a question about the book, I'm not going to bring it up simply because there's so much going on right now. I'm here to answer your questions any way I can.
Right.
And, if you want to talk about what's going on now, I'm happy to do that as well. As you all know, there's no bad questions. Anybody can ask me anything they want. And if I can't answer it, I'll tell you.
Uh-oh.
Give it a moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think we have a connection issue, but we'll be back in a second. We're still here.
There we go. Now you're
Okay,
moving.
well, you're moving now.
There you
We
go.
gotcha.
All right, folks. No, I'm very, very, again, happy to be here.
Oh.
Frozen.
back?
Yeah,
There we
you're
go.
back again. Yep.
Okay. Golly, guys, I'm sorry about this.
One
I
of those
promise
nights.
it's not on my end.
I've had a dozen years in tech support. I know. Yeah.
It happens.
It's
Well,
not on my end either, so.
It's
there is
the
a whole lot.
grace. It's the grace.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot going on right now, so I'm happy to answer any questions you all have. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Please feel free to ask me anything you want.
Definitely.
Okay, well, I do have a first question for you. As a special agent, you have come to appreciate the necessity to preserve data as evidence and remain fact-oriented. My question is, what about the experiences that fall outside the realm of these tenets? How can the unexplainable be explained as a fact?
Well, there's a lot in reality and in our world and our current paradigm that's frankly unexplainable. As a former special agent and a special agent in charge, we dealt a lot of times with information that was not either quantifiable or qualifiable, but was still very relevant to an investigation. So I don't think we should just dismiss information because, we can't, again, quantify it or qualify it. I am a disciple of the scientific methods and processes. I went to school at University of Miami. I graduated as microbiology and immunology. And then, as you all know, I became a special agent, where I've always considered myself just a facts ma'am kind of person. But with that said, life is far more complex than our current understanding of things. And so we have to give credence a lot of times to people's impression. I know it doesn't sound very fact oriented, but a lot of times in court, you'll hear somebody say, you'll hear an attorney say, or even a judge, well, how did that make you feel? How did you feel about that? And the reason why that's important is because, human interpretation of information and facts can be subjective. And I've always said that there's two types of truths that human beings kind of hold on to. There is this notion of a universal truth, which is like gravity. It affects us all equally at 9.8 meters per second squared. And there's no getting around it. Unless gravity might affect me a little bit more than others lately. I've been off my diet. But then you have this other thing called a personal truth. So you have a universal truth and you have a personal truth. And a personal truth is like religion and like politics. And they can feel an awful lot like a universal truth. And sometimes we confuse the two. The difference is that a universal truth is universally accepted, as a matter of fact, by everybody and everything, usually as a law of nature, whereas a personal truth is a little bit more subjective. But again, can be interpreted as a universal truth, depending on the topic that we're discussing and maybe your religious views and your cultural background and whatnot. And those are equally important. We can't dismiss it. Look, I live here in Wyoming, where I live near the Crow Nation. The indigenous people here have an independent nation here just north of me. And when you talk to them and you talk to their elders about some of their oral and verbal traditions, it's very compelling, and you can't dismiss it just because it's not written down per se, or because it's not galvanized or codified in some sort of a document. Doesn't mean that it's not useful information. Doesn't mean that it's not accurate. And so I think with the topic of UAP, we have to be very careful not to be dismissive simply because something may appear to be subjective to one person. It doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong or it shouldn't be considered.
Right. But a lot of things that we consider are actually so far-fetched, it's really hard for people to wrap their heads around the information or the data provided. I mean, some of the things we talk to people about are so far on the fringe that it's a lot of people find it to be false just because of their upbringing on how they judge what is real and what isn't.
Sure. But, we've learned over and over again, we can be absolutely sure of something and still be absolutely wrong. And this is kind of the pitfall that humankind continues to find itself. Let me share a little story with you that I just started really sharing publicly. So when you talk to most anthropologists, they'll suggest that modern human beings, Homo sapiens sapien, has been around between the last 200 and the last 400,000 years. And so if you look at a 24-hour clock, it was really only the last maybe 15 minutes of our existence towards midnight, the last 2,000 years, that it was the Greeks who said that there's two types of life form. You are either an animal or you are a plant. And it wasn't until the Renaissance, maybe the last 15 seconds of our existence, last 350 years ago, that we discovered another life form on this planet that's been here cohabitating all along. That is neither plant nor animal, and that's the world of fungus. And so what do? We pat ourselves on the shoulder, what clever little monkeys we are. And it wasn't but the last 5 seconds of our, think about this, last 5 seconds of our existence towards a stroke of midnight, the last 120 years, we actually discovered the true dominant life form on this planet that's been hidden all along. And in fact, if you take all the biomass of every plant and all the biomass of every animal and all the biomass of every fungus and add it all up together, it still does not add up to the biomass of this hidden life form that is arguably the true alpha life form of this planet and has been all along. And it wasn't until we had the technology to curve glass and stick it into a metal tube and famously shout the words, little beasties, did we discover the world of microorganisms, which was, by the way, considered at one point, if you were to try to mention that there was this entire universe of organisms that were so small you couldn't see them, but yet they comprise the human body and they're inside of us, and they thrive on the outside of the skin of the ISS space station, where the radiation is intolerable for human life and lives miles beneath the crushing depth of the Arctic ice, nobody would have believed you, right? Everybody said that's just nonsense, that's garbage, that's ridiculous. And yet here we are, right? So we're always learning new things about our reality and our existing and our current paradigm. And yes, I understand how some things can seem to be far-fetched, but the reality is that it's not really that far-fetched. Another case in point was with Galileo Galilei, when he first proposed the heliocentric model of our solar system, and the church almost burned him at the stake. He had to recant. In fact, the church refused to look through the very telescope to prove his observations. Now we look back and we say, well, that's silly. Why would the church ever care about that? It doesn't at all threaten the notion of God or anything like that, or God's preeminence. But what it did do at the time was it didn't threaten religion. It threatened mankind's understanding of religion.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, Polly.
Where to start? You got this, girl.
Yes.
She's
Oh
so
my
nervous.
God.
She doesn't know where to
don't
start with you,
where
though.
to
She has so many
start.
questions.
Yes. This is like I need a whole book, but here we go. I think it was in one of the, I think it was the last hearing. You were asked, guys, if there is, they were talking about hybrids. You were all asked about hybrids. Kind of, if you know about their existence, or if they are working with you inside the government, and you all said no. What can you tell us about hybrid?
Sure. Well, I was not asked that question when I testified about hybrids. I was asked the question about crash retrievals and potentially biological specimen recovery. That mission occurred before my time in HIP, but I was aware of it, as was everybody else in my program. As far as hybrids are concerned, I wasn't aware of any of that, but my focus was primarily nuts and bolts. We did have individuals that were trained medical professionals and practitioners and doctors and surgeons that were part of our team, and certainly that would have been more their focus. It has been postulated before by some folks, which I cannot say one way or the other, I don't know, that perhaps this NHI may be looking at human beings from a reproductive perspective, and perhaps they've lost their ability to reproduce. Who knows? But look, it's not uncommon. We as human beings do it all the time. We fly over the Serengeti and we dart a wildebeest that's sitting there in the savannah. And we come down, we take its blood, and we test all sorts of things to determine its health and its migration patterns. And then we leave. And then we compare that blood sample to other blood samples we have. Is it really that far-fetched to consider, if there was another intelligent life form, that it would be just as interested in us as we are with them? And that the same types of ways and manners at which we analyze biological specimens could be to some degree similar to what they're doing, and perhaps in the pursuit of science, perhaps in the pursuit of understanding our reproductive ability, our reproductive health. Are there any chromosomes now that are beginning to become less expressed, and any type of genotypes that are becoming less expressed over time? Is there a dilution, or is there a particular mutation occurring in a genetic sample within a certain group of individuals? I don't think it's far-fetched to speculate that if NHI is interested in human beings per se, that our genetics and our reproductive abilities and capabilities would be something of interest to them.
Thank you so much.
You ready for me?
Yep.
Okay. As far as what would true disclosure look like in your eyes? What do you consider it to be?
Wow, great question. Well, I think we're there. I think we are already experiencing disclosure right now. I've told people in the beginning many years ago when it happens that disclosure is a process, it's not an event. And if you compare the last 7 years compared to the last 70, I think we've had much more disclosure in just the last 7 years. You now have former directors of national intelligence, former directors of the CIA, former presidents of the United States, all coming out and saying, yeah, this is real. This is something that we need to pay attention to. You have members of Congress that are being provided classified briefings. So if you're waiting for a president or a former president to say it, well, that's already happened. If you're waiting for somebody in the intelligence community to say it, well, that's already happened. If you're waiting for somebody in Congress and to pass laws and legislation, well, that's already happened. If you're waiting for somebody to create a UFO investigative body within the United States government, don't look now, but that's already happened. Mm-hmm. So I think, the problem is that when you say the word disclosure, I think it means something different to different people. Some people think of capital D as disclosure. Some people think of little d. And some people think confirmation is disclosure, but it's not. Confirmation is having your own narrative confirmed one way or the other. Mm-hmm. But disclosure doesn't necessarily have to comport to anyone's prior narrative, right? So confirmation isn't necessarily disclosure. And I think there are some people out there that are expecting confirmation of their narrative versus just a general disclosure statement or process. And so I know this is probably not answering your question directly, but I think we are well down that road of disclosure. I think it's happening literally right now.
Yeah.
Don't you believe that actually disclosure has morphed into more of transparency?
Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah, I do. And I think that's what this is about ultimately. Look, we have faith and confidence in all our organizations and institutions, whether it's religion or government, because we believe that there is some degree of transparency, and that we, the people, so to speak, are ultimately the ones that are the benefactors of the efforts of our governments, and transparency is a critical piece to that. That is why democracy works and tyranny doesn't, because tyranny is the opposite of transparency. It's opaqueness and it's misinformation. And the problem is when you have a democracy and misinformation is being provided to the public, now you have a much more significant and serious issue on your hand, because it doesn't take long for the people to begin to mistrust their government. And when that happens, it's a very, very quick and very slippery slope into a situation that I dare not even try to think about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Before we go down to Odessa, we do have a question from the chat from nCloud. If aliens can reach Earth, couldn't they destroy us easily with Taiwan, China, Israel, Iran, and Russia, Ukraine? Aren't humans more violent to each other, willing to wage war and develop tech to kill?
Well, we are extremely violent creatures. But then again, when you go filming, and again, back to the Serengeti, and you watch a wildebeest being ripped apart by a lion, well, that's nature, and we don't interfere. We let that natural process occur. Very much, if somebody was doing a scientific study on human beings, you wouldn't want to interfere with the way we do business. You want to study them. And how do you study them? Well, you study them in their natural environment and in their natural behavior, which is what we do. Do they have the capability through their technology to surpass us virtually in every aspect? Yes, we've seen that demonstrated. And they have the ability to interfere with our nuclear weapons. But they also didn't stop it. Okay, so people will say, well, they're here to help us, and like kids taking matches out of the hands of children. I don't see it that way. What I do see is what we call ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. There seems to be a very significant interest in our military equities. And at no time did NHI stop us from dropping bombs and vaporizing 500,000 human beings off this planet during World War II. And after that, they didn't stop us from going from atomic weapons to nuclear weapons. And they didn't stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons now into half the countries around the world. And they didn't stop us from testing these. And they didn't stop Chernobyl. They didn't stop Fukushima. They didn't stop 3 Mile Island. So
right, they didn't stop any of it. They just observed.
Right. So I think there's two sides to that argument. Some people say, well, look, they're showing us what their capabilities are. Okay, well, I'll buy that. They are. But, you know, I'm not willing to bet your life and my life and our future of our country and our world because someone thinks that they're here for peaceful reasons. I hope that's the case. I truly do. Man, that would be fantastic. But even if there's a 1% chance that's not the case, I don't think we can take that 1% chance because there's too much at stake. So what we need to do is we need to, first of all, stop killing each other around the world and start working with each other. That's what we should do.
Right.
And then maybe try to tackle this incredible enigma collectively as a global society. Look,
There
we've
was a
done
way
it
to do
before.
both.
There is.
Same
And
time, exactly.
Yeah, and we've done it before. We've done it before. You know, there's times that even in the height of the Cold War with then Soviet Union, we worked with the Russians. You know, it can be done, and we don't have to necessarily, you know, blow each other and rip each other apart. You know, I look. War is one of those things that unless you've been through it, it's very hard to explain. There are no winners in war. Everybody loses. Just some people lose worse than others. And
Right.
it should be a last ditch endeavor. It is a horrific experience for anybody to have to endure. And I think, you know, maybe one of the reasons, if there was an NHI involvement and interest in human beings, maybe there's this cautionary desire not to interfere with us until we figure ourselves out. Maybe we're not ready. Look, every time, you know, we're given something good, we turn it around to blow each other up, right?
Absolutely.
It's in our nature. You want to look, here's an example. Look at social media. It's a perfect social experiment. You know, if you gave everybody on social media a knife and a gun, I tremor at what, you know, the consequences would be.
Right.
We are simply not ready for that type of engagement with something that is potentially beyond, you know, well beyond evolutionary speaking to us. And then we have the problem of, you know, the issue of what we call anthropomorphism. Look, everything we do as human beings, we look through human eyes, and it is almost impossible to think otherwise. Look, I live here in the middle of Wyoming. I have 4 German Shepherds, and they all have human names, and I talk to them like little babies. Why is that? Well, because I'm giving them anthropomorphic values. You'll hear people all the time say, "Oh, I have this beautiful boat. She's a gorgeous boat." We even ascribe inanimate objects human characteristics because we don't know how else other to live our lives. So we ascribe everything a human attribute. So what happens now when we're come face to face with the potential that what we're dealing with is definitively not human? Is it something like AI? Is it binary? Does it not have the ability to have empathy and sympathy? Or maybe it does. Maybe it's something that is very common throughout the cosmos, and you know that's part of being sentient, the ability to have empathy and sympathy for one another, and you know, love. In essence, I tell people all the time, there's 2 fundamental motivations for 95% of the actions human beings do every day, and that is love and fear. Fear is what drives warfare. Fear is what drives racism and hatred. Love is what explains a mother to jump in the middle of oncoming traffic to save her child in the face of certain death. Love is empathy and sympathy. And maybe that's the important piece here. Maybe the question is, does NHI have the capacity to love? Because if so, then I think we stand a much better chance perhaps communicating and relating to non-human intelligence. But if it doesn't, then perhaps love really is very precious. Maybe it is something very special, and we need to protect it instead of, you know, squandering those opportunities and killing each other.
Yeah.
Hey, Odessa, you want to ask your question?
I do. It's another question from our chat. And somebody's wondering about something you said in your book. Since you're not going to mention anything in the book unless we ask, here's your first book question.
Okay.
Is it genetics that makes Cherokees better at this type of thing? It's something that you mentioned in the book.
I'm not
when we
saying-
were talking a little
Yeah, I
bit
don't-
ago, so I had to kind of back up.
I don't think better or worse is a way. I think just more sensitive, right? Look,
Yeah.
there's people that are on the autism spectrum that have something called synesthesia, and that is the ability to, for example, you overlap sensory input. So someone might see color when they hear the notes of a musical instrument, right? Does that mean they're necessarily better or worse than? Not necessarily. It just means that they are more receptive to input in a slightly different way than
Yeah.
other individuals. And so perhaps the
Perception
same
is
thing
different.
is with indigenous personnel, people. Perhaps it's they are just more sensitive. Look, the indigenous gene pool is, if you look at it genetically speaking, is really remarkable because it's been isolated and insulated for a very long time. When you look at the homogeny of genetics throughout the world, there's been so much mixing of the genetic pool. That's why we have like things like 23andMe, because people say, oh, look, I'm 25% Scottish, I'm 5% Middle Eastern, I'm 2% African, 10% Asian. Because we have this homogenous now gene pool, whereas
Right.
indigenous people tend to be a little more isolated, and those genetics tend to be a little bit more pure, not necessarily in a positive or negative way, just that it has been fairly consistent throughout several hundred, if not thousands or eons of years, right? It's kind of like the Galapagos Islands. When you go to the Galapagos, you have this isolation of nature that has been isolated from other genetic influence.
Also
So they have
culturally.
evolved, and culturally as well. So
Yeah.
you're asking a great question that really goes into a very deep subject, really about what it means to be human, really, and what defines the human being, and is it genetics or is it something more than that? And where does
And
sentience come from?
I'll throw my 2 cents in. And is it really that other, or is it part of us already? Is it
Right.
already here?
Right.
Just
It
throw
could
that out
already,
there.
sure, absolutely. And look, there's remote viewing is one of those things that it turns out that folks that have indigenous blood tend to be pretty sensitive to it. There's some people who better piano players. There's some people who are better basketball players. Well, there's some people who are better remote viewers.
Yeah.
I have to say something before we go to Nas. There is a comment in the chat that says, if the aim is transparency, then declining to answer a question due to NDA is counterproductive, as are the skiffs.
I want to take that one, please.
Yeah.
Because Lou has had to deal with this enough.
Maybe, yeah. For
Yeah,
sure.
I agree.
Yeah, and by the way, Lou, I also am a deeply rooted constitutionalist, so I understand. I know what you're dealing with, and I saw your Facebook post on March 7th. I get it. I see that approaching the limit of not seeing the results that should come about from that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So when it comes to NDA and skiffs and transparency, then I'll just come up with one thing theoretically: the existence of a machine that has transphasic capability. Okay. Well, let's say we announce that to the public, and this is how the science works for doing transphasic material fusions, which lets you overlay materials on top of other materials, which results in materials that don't have the material density we expect for something of that volume and mass on the periodic table of elements. So you can't identify it. But once you know transphasic material fusions are possible, then all of a sudden you can actually evaluate it and come up with those answers.
Correct.
Okay, well, transphasic material fusions, once you have that capability, you can keep overlaying things on top of each other. You have a projectile, you phase it out, bring another one into the same spot, phase the other one back in. Twice the material density, but it is a whole lot weirder physics than that. And if you keep overlaying them on top of each other, you will reach a point where something as simple as aluminum will be at 99% criticality. And if you launch that projectile from a railgun, you will have bullets that are nuclear.
Right.
Now, should we be delivering that knowledge to the entire world right now, or
No.
that should be disclosed in a skiff?
Right.
To,
This is your great point. Great
Joe
point.
Jim down the road, the technology. Think of whoever it is in the world that you envision as your ideological opposite, the people you consider a threat. Should I give them that knowledge right now?
Right.
Okay.
So great point. Kim Jong-un keeps threatening the world with nuclear annihilation. Do you really want him having a capability to deliver that completely anonymously within seconds anywhere in the world? I
God,
don't.
no.
And so, we have to understand that there's a fine line between transparency. And this is why I actually give a long talk on why governments keep things secret. And there's real reasons to do it, to protect sources and methods. And then there's reasons that I don't agree with, like trying to protect the moral fabric of society, or trying to hide or obfuscate malfeasance or something that we've done that's been embarrassing. We have a long history of covering things up and classifying things for no good reason.
At least that distrust you talked about earlier.
Right. Look at MK Ultra, right? I mean, we actually
exactly.
we went out and we gave, or look at the Tuskegee, poor people, the Tuskegee experiments with syphilis. We allowed fellow Americans to die from syphilis, even though we had a cure, simply in the name of science, right? So, there have been gross violations and abuses of the security classification system. And for those, I will do what I do. This is why I left the Pentagon and why I went public, because I do not agree classifying the fact that UAP are real. Look, you've been spending millions of dollars of your taxpayer money each year. Meanwhile, the government's been telling you public, we don't look at UFOs. Well, we have been for the last 70 years, right? I think that's wrong. But at the same time, if you want to know exactly how a UFO works, I'm not sure I'm ready and comfortable to have that conversation, where now someone like North Korea could go ahead and reverse engineer and find some insights and use it against
They're not already
us.
doing it. Yeah.
Right. So, and as far as my security clearance, I take that very seriously. Look, I've told people before, there's a difference between doing things right and doing things right now. And we only have one chance to do it right. And look, if I go to jail, you won't hear anything else from me. If I say one thing too much, I will be in jail tomorrow and you'll never see me again. And guess what? Any questions you have for me, you'll never be able to ask. So what we've been doing is pushing the line slowly but surely. People like Chris Mellon and a lot of people behind the scenes that are working very hard. Look, there was a time when I first came out, I could never even mention the words crash retrieval. Now it's in my book because I had the Pentagon, imagine that, approve me to actually write it down, right? And publish it. So we've come a long way, and I know people are chomping at the bit, and they're starving for information, and I know they feel that they have a right to it, and I believe they do have a right to it. But there's some details that maybe we don't want to reveal, right? There's the mere fact that North Korea has nuclear weapons has not been classified, but how those nuclear weapons work and maybe where they're aimed at and how long it takes for them to hit their target, maybe that's still classified for good reason, because you don't want other countries learning from that, right? And doing something bad, because at the end of the day, we are humans and we will do bad things to each other. So that would be my response to that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Nas, go ahead. It's
Yes.
really
Okay.
your question.
So first thing, I'll plug the book for you. Anyone that does not have all of the time in the world to go try to figure out the history of, ufology into where we are with UAP, and the battle that's been fought between the people that are trying to hide it and the people that are trying to unhide it, Imminent is the authoritative framework of all the pieces that are in there and all the different parts that you talk about, all the different projects that have gone on and things like that. These are the launching points. If you want to know more about any of those things, you've got the information and you can follow it from there.
It's so good.
Imminent gives
like
the
this.
framework right there. Yeah. And
Well,
I have
appreciate
highlights
that.
all throughout the book too.
I sincerely appreciate that. And I will also caveat this, because I decided early on not to make it a dry read, meaning I decided to put a lot of myself into it. I felt very hypocritical that here I was demanding transparency from our government, and I'm going to write a book, and I'm not going to be transparent about myself. And I knew that when I wrote this book, there were things in here I was going to put about my personal life that was going to upset some people. But I did it because I have to be truthful. There is no alternative. And again, it would be ultimate hypocrisy for me to demand transparency and truthfulness from our own government if I'm not willing to do that with you. And so that's why I put some things in there that to this day, there's some people that give me a lot of hate and grief for it. And I had a choice. I didn't have to say what I did. I could have just hidden it and nobody would have ever known. But I wanted to put it out there. I think it's important because that's how we lead by example. And I think, this conversation is going to continue. There's a lot of whistleblowers coming out, folks, and they've got stories to tell. And what we want to do is give them a safe space where they can show everything, right? Even maybe the ugly warts at times, because that is, I think, sunlight is the best antiseptic. Yeah. And we have nothing to fear from the truth. Let's let the truth is what it is. Yeah.
And I've got my question here that I want to help the audience understand is, if there's the potential for the celestial intelligence to be hostile, we need to be prepared for that. But the other problem is the consideration of them not being hostile, and we are over prepared and aggressive.
100%.
Which you describe very well in the book.
100%.
Yeah, exactly.
The gorilla and the biologist.
Right.
Right.
No, look, I'll tell you, I had a conversation in the Pentagon. It's been about 3 years now with a very senior general. And after about an hour of giving them a very sensitive and classified briefing, the general, I could tell, was less interested in what I had to say and said, look, Lou, at the end of the day, this is great. But if all I need to know, if this thing lands on the White House lawn tomorrow, do I put my hand out in friendship or do I put an M16 to its head? And I said, General, you've missed the point of the whole briefing. Either one of those could be wrong. It's just not a binary solution. Stop looking at this from a military perspective. I understand there are aspects that are potentially national security related. I get it. I'm a product of national security too. But this topic is so much bigger. It affects each and every one of us differently and yet equally. And it affects us psychologically, and it affects us philosophically and sociologically and theologically. And if you think that you're just going to put a gun to one of these things' head or put his hand out in friendship, either one of those could be wrong. It could be you put your hand out in friendship, maybe it's a sign of weakness. You put an M16 to its head, well, that's a sign of violence, right? So
we got to look at this from a culturally ambassador-like situation. You've got to look at this as a cultural ambassador.
That's right.
You can't just put a gun to somebody's head or put your hand out. You're right. Absolutely, I agree. And again, it's all in the book. You guys really check it out. It's totally worth a read, I promise. Lou's not going to wax poetic about it, but it really is a great book.
It is. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I got to say this, for all the people in the chat that are stating that he hasn't come forward with any information pertaining to transparency in the book. You are totally wrong.
Totally wrong.
I have seen so many actual testimonies from Lou within his rhetoric that blew me away. So you need to read the book before you make those type of comments. And I thought I'd just state that.
Look, I'm used to it, guys. Here's my response to people who feel that way. And I make it very simple. I don't work for you. You don't pay my bills. I don't work for you. You can go out and get your ass out to Congress just like I do. You can go to classified meetings if you have a security clearance. You can pay your dues with your government and go to war and all that stuff. And you can do what I'm doing. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. You can get out of your basement of your mother's house, put some clothes on, go join the army, go be a productive citizen, instead of sitting there and being entitled, demanding, you owe me, you owe me. I owe you nothing. I am doing this because I believe it is a right thing to do. And people out there who want to have answers, I am trying my best to provide it to them. And by the way, last I checked, I'm not making a boatload of money on this. I could, like a lot of other folks. I don't, so when I go out to do a tour, I'm barely covering my travel expense, a plane ticket, usually in coach, and a hotel. So and I'm taking time away from doing other real work that I could be doing. So My
Right.
response to people is, look, I've got a real life with a real family with real responsibilities. I have a mortgage like everybody else, and I've got responsibilities. And I'm still doing this. I'm doing this for
Right.
everybody's sake. I hope they understand that. I know a lot of people don't, but for those who never will, hey man, all we can do is say, sorry, man, maybe you want to get another hobby. I don't know.
Okay, my second question for you is, can you tell us a little bit about the Great Skills Program, otherwise known as Gray Fox?
Yeah.
What's it
Well,
used with aliens?
I'm living proof you don't have to be great, nor do you have to have a lot of skills. It's a nuanced program. A Great Skills Program was a name that they used for an organization that was in Maryland. I don't think I can go much further than the details of where it is, but they would select certain individuals to perform certain missions and functions. There's a little bit available right now online. I think you can see that's publicly available. I have not been given permission to talk about it, other than honestly, I put in my book, I thought they were going to redact it, and they wound up redacting some other portions of it. But when they didn't redact it, I was like, whoo, because I knew I could talk a little bit about it. It is a program that they use to find people with certain skill sets. I think the name is a misnomer, because people think, oh, you have to be some super secret spy or some super soldier. Not necessarily. You just have to have a propensity in a certain area that they're looking for. And whether that's in kinetic or tactical type operations, in some of the task force with the multicolors, I don't think I can talk about that publicly yet,
Right.
but or into some of the more things like remote viewing and the Stargate program, they often would recruit people out of these very nuanced programs because they were looking for a very specific. Think of it as an employee pool. Think of it as temporary employment. Think about saying, I need a job for the next 3 months. I'm a really good carpenter. So you go to the carpenters union and they said, great, guess what? We need a carpenter with your skills to build a bookcase. That's kind of what it's like.
Right.
There's other people that'll sell you a bunch of stuff saying how great and cool it is. But the reality is there's a lot of organizations out there that do a lot of great stuff. I just happen to be privileged to be in one of those programs. I don't think it was because I was necessarily good at anything. Maybe it was my comic relief skills. I don't know.
Maybe that.
Yeah. But I was very honored to be part of that effort. And there were people in there that were far more skilled than I was and deserve a heck of a lot more credit for what they've done and what they continue to do for our great nation. So I'll leave it at that, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a good answer.
Holly.
What would you, in your opinion, what would happen if tomorrow we wake up and we see millions of crafts landing in planet Earth?
Well,
what's going to happen with Earthlings?
You want my honest opinion? And I'm going to caveat here is because I think most people would do this because we're human beings. There's a reason why I live in the middle of Wyoming, in the middle of nowhere with 5 German Shepherds and heavily armed in a bunker, because I'm always trying to prepare for the unexpected event. That 1% chance that something can go wrong, I want to be prepared for it. And more importantly, I want my family to be prepared for it and protected. So what I would do would be to be very observant. I would not panic, but I also would not be necessarily overly eager to engage something unless the government or our government and other world governments were involved. What I would do, honestly, is probably make sure that I have a communication plan with all my family. We have a rally point, a rendezvous point. There's enough food and medicine and shelter. And it's not my fear from UAP or UFO or NHI. My fear is from other human beings, frankly, that are going to panic and go crazy. And, all of a sudden now the going back to the moral fabric of society, that begins to unravel again, not because of UAPs, but because of ourselves, because, something happens. Look what happens when the stock markets start to tank. You get panic on Wall Street, right? People start running to the banks and wanting to take their money out and doing weird things.
Yes.
Because
Getting so mean.
we're very reactive,
Yeah.
right? That is who we are as a species. We are very reactive. We're very afraid of the unknown. And this is genetic. This is survival for us. If evolution has really programmed us to be this way. The problem is it's sometimes that's not always the best way to react to something new. And so again, what would I do if I woke up and now there's millions of UAP in the sky? Probably not much. Probably wait for a call from Washington and find myself on a plane going back to Washington to work.
Yeah.
Right.
So
we have
what
another
would
question in the audience. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
what would be the main reason for governments and religions not wanting to, to keep hiding the truth? What is the main reason?
Well, there's
if
a
we
lot of reasons. There's a lot of
we
really
have technology.
Yeah, so I don't agree with these reasons, but there's a lot of reasons. So first and foremost, governments don't like to admit a problem for which there's no solution. And by the way, religions don't either. Case in point, in the 1950s, the United States and Russia had the then Soviet Union had a peace treaty that we would not fly manned reconnaissance missions over mainland Russia and vice versa. So what did we do? Well, we did exactly that. The CIA got with Lockheed Skunk Works and built the U-2 spy plane. And for the first few missions, the plane, this plane was specially built to fly faster and higher than any other aircraft ever in the world. And for the first few missions, it was mission success. Guess what? The Russians didn't do anything. So we had succeeded in our mission. That was until the Soviets developed the SA-2 surface-to-air missile and successfully shot one down and subsequently paraded Powers, the pilot, and the wreckage in front of the United Nations and the world. And in fact, admitted they were tracking every single flight, but they never admitted it, not even to their own people, until when? Until they had an ability to shoot it down, to neutralize the threat. And governments are that way. Another case in point is look at 1947 with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the scientific community and academia for years refused to release the interpretations, if you will, and the translation of the Dead Sea Scrolls, simply for the reason they were worried about disrupting, at the time, the current understanding of the Judeo-Christian belief system. They thought that the American people in the world couldn't handle it, right? So there's a lot of reasons why governments keep things like this secret, because ultimately, even religions, it comes down to faith and confidence. Governments only last as long as the people have faith and confidence in those organizations and institutions. Once they don't, the jig is up. That is the biggest threat. And so admitting that you can't protect your citizens when that is your primary directive as a government from something, whether it's a pandemic, national pandemic like COVID was, or it's terrorism, or it's UAPs or drones over New Jersey and everywhere else. I mean, one only has to look at last month how we dealt with the drone issue, right? A couple months ago. Oh, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here, folks.
La, 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 la.
Yeah, right.
La, la, la,
La. Exactly. So, it shouldn't be that much of a surprise that a lot of governments do that. Most governments, if not all governments, do that.
Okay, Nancy.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to ask you, what do you wish readers would take away from the book that you wrote?
I'm just an average person doing his job. I consider myself patriotic. I'm not perfect. I consider myself, if there was a subline to my book, it would be an unexceptional man living through exceptional times.
It's amazing.
Hmm.
Okay, we have a question from the chat from
We
NCloud.
do. Yes, we do.
Who has a better chance at reverse engineering vehicles? China with its 1.4 billion people, bringing in top university talent, forcing them to work on projects, or the USA paying private contractors?
I think it might be rhetorical. I'm
Wow.
not sure.
Wow. Look, China does a lot of things really, really well. Don't be
Yeah.
fooled. Anybody who tells you that they're a backwater country has never had an honest assessment of China. China is perhaps, if not the number one competitor to the United States, certainly top two. They are extremely, extremely proficient and highly, highly intelligent. And they've learned the lessons from our mistakes. They're very observant. Now, do they have their faults? Absolutely. Is their government, obviously repression and censorship is probably my biggest issues with China. But it doesn't mean that they're not technically proficient. Look at their satellite capabilities right now. If you want to have a scary conversation, talk to a U.S. member of Congress about Chinese satellite and space capabilities. I'm not going to go into any detail, but they are extremely advanced. And I think for me, that is the concern because, look, there have been areas in the past, for example, let's take Russia, for example. People think, oh, Russia's an adversary. Well, yeah, they are sometimes. But there's other examples where they're not. There's a long time where there's 5 nations that really kind of claim ownership of the Arctic, of the North Pole area. And that is because the 5 nations that border that area share responsibility, Russia being one of them, and the United States vis-a-vis through Alaska. And we work with them, and we have worked very well with them for decades on patrolling the area and breaking ice and helping ships pass through. And that's
We froze up.
perfect. ISS,
There we go.
don't look now, guys, but we don't have a space shuttle anymore. Up until recently, we were hitchhiking rides with the Russian cosmonauts out of Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
So, we and by the way, that's designed to interface with the ISS space station, and even the old Mir. So there's a lot of synergy there. And I think part of the problem we have is that as peoples, we tend to all carry our own flag and we rally around our own flag. And unless you're carrying my flag, then you're on that side. You're on that side of the field. I don't want to deal with you. You're strange and you're weird. But the reality is we're all people. The one thing I really find interesting talking to astronauts when they're in space, when they look down at the Earth, they see something that you don't see on a map. And same with the globe. There's no borders. There's no lines. There's no titles and differentiation of countries. It's all just one big chunk of mass that kind of ebbs in and flows to one another. And then on the other side of the world, you have another big chunk of mass of Earth. And we all live together, don't we? And I think that's something that we should try to remember as much as possible, that we're all in this together. We're all stuck on this little rock together. Probably be in our best interest to start working together. I'm not going to fearmonger over China. There are things, like I said, I disagree with the way they deal with certain things, but hell, there's things that I disagree with my own government. I had to leave my own job in protest because I didn't agree with what they were doing. So, it doesn't make China any worse or Russia. I think there's things that they do very well. And my concern is that, the UAP topic is one of them. China has already admitted they have a UAP program. Russia has already admitted they have a UAP program. Wouldn't it be great if we all just stopped bickering for just a couple minutes and started working with each other on that? Say, look, you want to go ahead and still do this and do that, and we can still argue over Taiwan, and we can still argue over Crimea, and we still argue. But on this one thing, can we just kind of agree to get along, because there's so much at stake? Like, this involves the whole world. Maybe we can put our differences aside.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question for you, Lou. How much do you actually trust the U.S. government on a scale of 1 to 5 being the highest and 1 being the lowest?
So that's a
About
complex
topic, obviously.
okay, because that's a complex answer, and it depends on the topic. You know,
Yeah.
ultimately, at the end
Right.
of the day, the U.S. government is nothing but people. That's all it is. It's composed. We look at it as this big monolithic thing, but in reality, it's not. It's just an amalgamation of people like you and me, and they all have different interests and different political affiliations and whatnot. My concern is when you have elements in the government that are corrupt. Now, when I say corrupt, I don't mean necessarily financially corrupt. Corruption is the act of giving away one of your own core values in exchange for something else. And when you do
Right.
that in government, you begin to erode the very foundation of democracy. And from there, it's a very slippery slope, very quick slope into total tyranny. So I trust my government to do the things that it is supposed to do pretty well, 4 or 5. But I also, when the government gets in trouble, I don't trust it to come clean or fess up. I give it about a -2, if that's possible.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's the government wants to self-preserve itself, and I get it. We have the government in the world, as far as I'm concerned. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. You know, this government gave opportunities to my family no other government could or would. So it's a wonderful country, but it hurts itself when it's not honest and open with the people. And if there are things we've done wrong, we have to own up to it. We have to. That's what separates us from everybody else. We have to hold ourselves accountable to that.
Don't you think though that a lot of the information that they're withholding from the public for decades, if they were to come clean about it, the reason why they're not is because they're afraid of castigating themselves?
Well, there's the problem is they spent 70, 80 years creating this tangled ball of yarn, and they've backed themselves into a corner, and now they're stuck, and they've got to figure out a way to get out.
Right.
It's not easy, right? And now you've got culpability there. You've got people that could literally go to jail. You've got problems with businesses. So, for example, let's say you have an aerospace company A versus aerospace company B. And let's say in the 1950s, some general gave a sweetheart deal to company A to look at some material. 20 years later, company A now is a multi-billion-dollar aerospace corporation. What happened to company B? By the way, they're supposed to have, government has what they call fair competition, free and fair competition. Well, if this turns out not to be the case, and now all of a sudden company B goes bankrupt, 200 people lose their jobs, and oh, by the way, stockholders, right? Think of the Securities Exchange Commission. Now stockholders lost their investment. You know, over the course of several decades, you could be looking at trillions of dollars worth of liability. And that's just with one company, right? So it's not just a matter of saying, oh, well, you know, time to come clean. No, there's real consequences on the line that we got to figure out. And this is why I've always said, look, people want their pound of flesh. I get it. You know, say anybody who lies, haul them up in front of Congress. I think what we should do is offer amnesty with a sunset. I think what we do is say, look, any of you have been working on these programs, you've got 2 years to come out and tell, you know, Congress what you know. And by the way, we're going to give you an award for it. Congratulations. Thank you for your help in national security. But after 2 years, if we find out you were part of something and you didn't come forward, we're going to have ourselves a different conversation at that point.
Yep.
Okay. We have one more question from the chat room from Bushy Bado. Lou, what phase of disclosure are we in and what is next? Also, is there anything new or unexpected in where the process is now?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm focusing this year primarily on legislation that's on its way. Our Congress is very engaged. We have now several organizations in our government within the executive branch that are now engaged in the UAP topic. It's starting to work. It's starting to work. As far as what phase we are in disclosure, I don't understand necessarily what phase. Look, I'm a very simple-minded kind of guy. I'm a gearhead. I work on cars as a hobby. I prefer to look at gears in a car. You know, you kind of start off in first gear and then you kind of go up to second gear. You know, or maybe look at it like crawl, walk, run, right? I think, 7 years ago when we first came out, we weren't even crawling. We were probably writhing and slithering on the floor. I think we are transitioning from crawling to walking. and I think that's fantastic. I think at this point it's inevitable, fait accompli, that people are going to get some form of disclosure that they're looking for. I think it's already upon us. You now have organizations like the National Science Foundation and NASA involved in this topic significantly. So that is a telltale sign right there. I think we still have a ways to go, though. And I think people need to be patient. And people say, well, I've been patient my whole life. Yeah, I understand. You know what? So have the rest of us. But this is a very complex issue that the government has put itself into over decades, and it's not going to be untangled in 24 hours. This isn't an episode of the Kardashians. This is real life. This is, I mean, no disrespect, by the way, if anybody watches the Kardashians. I say that because this isn't a reality show. This is real life, right?
Actual reality.
Yeah, actually, right. And there's real consequences, right? It's not someone getting butthurt. This is like real consequences that we've got to take very seriously. And this is why we have to do this the right way. And again, the right way is not necessarily the right now way.
Yeah. No,
I've been thinking a lot about, the way that you present the struggle that you've gone through, and you're in Imminent, of course, in the book, and just acting behind the scenes and looking at kind of the position that the public expects you to be in when you're in this place, because they see you as representation for them, for this that's going on, and they don't understand that your work is that as a catalyst to get our government to do the job it's supposed to do, and that's where disclosure is supposed to be coming from.
Amen, brother.
You're bailing out the lifeboat to keep things going until they can get off their asses and do what they took an oath to do.
Correct.
Which is what you're doing, defending the Constitution.
Correct. And nudging them along when they, start to sputter, nudging them along and saying, look, we're going to have this conversation one way or the other. We should probably have it your way. Vice, we're trying to avoid the catastrophic conversation, but the conversation is going to happen whether you like it or not. So, probably best to get on board and be part of the solution instead of being identified as part of the problem.
Right. Which brings me back to your post on March 7th, because you were rightly so taking our legislators to task. They had been provided actionable intelligence, and then they all get distracted in a culture war instead of addressing what counts.
Right.
But as part of that post, there is the discussion that if they don't step up and take responsibility for managing how this process goes, that it's going to be taken out of their hands.
That's
the
correct.
Decision is going to be made for them.
That's right. The people, the Vox Populi will have a vote, and that vote is probably going to be different than the way some of the bureaucrats, want to handle things.
Right. And, with the other part of that I think really everyone needs to hear is that just like the vast majority of people that we have interviewed that are attached to any facet of the great collection of phenomena that's attached to this, is that there is this knowledge and expectation of a consciousness shift coming, and that's going to change dynamically the balance of power in the world.
Well, look, paradigm moments happen as part of our evolution. Now, they don't happen very often in one's lifetime, but they're necessary for us to grow. Life for us is something that we either evolve or we stagnate and perish. And that is the law of nature with all forms of life, not just humans. And I've always said this analogy before, and I'll say it again. There were these fundamental paradigm moments that have happened in our evolution that helped us see things differently. And at the time, when we were experiencing them, were very uncomfortable. We were very fearful, but it turned out it was necessary for us to have these experiences. And I've always make the analogy of when humankind first crawled out of the, Plato's cave and looked upon the heavens for the first time and realized their universe just got a whole lot bigger, right? And the second time was perhaps when two people were together and one struck a rock against another and created a spark, and now for the first time could illuminate the darkness. And those monsters hiding behind the trees, well, they were just bushes, right? Mm-hmm. And perhaps the last time we had a paradigm moment like this and again, it doesn't happen very often in one's lifetime, but as a species, they must. Perhaps was when two fishermen were standing on a sandy beach together, and one says, "You know what? This morning is the day. I'm going to go and I'm going to sail over the horizon." The other fisherman says, "Oh, you don't want to do that because you're going to fall off the earth, and there are these sea monsters out there, these giant kraken. They'll break up your ship." Yeah. And we laugh about that, but the reality is, that wasn't far from the truth. There really are sea monsters. They're just called great white sharks and blue whales and giant squid of the Pacific, and they're not really monsters anymore. They're just part of our natural environment. They're part of nature. They're part of our new reality. And I think that's very much the same thing with this topic of UAP. I think maybe we're just standing virtually on another beach about to sail over a new horizon. That's all.
I couldn't agree more, Lou. I think the whole panel is probably in agreement with that statement. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. We have a question from American Isaac Isakai. Lou, what is the most important thing, in your opinion, that should be disclosed in the short term, near future, that you can discuss?
Ooh, great question. Well, what the government needs to realize is the enemy here isn't information. The enemy is ignorance, and there's a difference. And I think if there was something that the U.S. government should disclose, which it already kind of is the understanding that we have had a long, long history investigating these things officially with a lot of money for decades, and they've yielded some results. And we don't have to tell the American people exactly what those results were, but I think it's time to level the American people to say, yeah, we've got stuff. And we're looking into it, and we're not going to tell you exactly what it does yet or what we've learned, but it's interesting. And, maybe there's some applications here that can benefit humanity. Lest we forget that during the Apollo missions and the development of the lunar mission for the brief 10 years that we were competing with the Soviets to put a person on the moon, over 6,800 life-changing industries, not products, industries were introduced to humankind. Things like the LED light bulb and things like the CAT scan and MRIs, things that have long outlived their initial intended purpose, that have continued to benefit humankind. And that was just with 10 years going to the moon. Can you imagine the potential here with this type of technology? And
it's crazy.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you. In your book, you said you saw a report about non-human bodily remains in regards to their makeup, in regards to their brains being smooth rather than convoluted, and that they had a two-chamber heart, kind of like a lizard. What I wanted to ask is that information, before you received it, was it vetted?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And not vetted by me. It was vetted by many others before me and during my time. I was not the one who came up with that information. I decided to purvey it and to communicate that in the book, so once and for all people would know the truth. But a lot of that was done even before my time, even before I was born to some degree. But there was information on it that the U.S. government had through the intelligence community and through the Department of Defense and some of the members of the military-industrial complex. That is, yes, that information was vetted, and it was scrutinized quite a bit by trained professionals. In some cases, that were surgeons, some of the best surgeons and medical practitioners at the time.
Yeah.
So even though you saw the information secondhand, do you confirm that there is alien life, that alien life exists?
Oh, I can tell you that. Yeah, I mean, and I can tell you. I hate to say alien because I don't know. Alien means it could be from outer space when it could be really, as I said,
Right,
outer space, inner space, or the space in between. Could be from underwater. Could be all sorts of options.
right.
But non-human, distinctly non-human. Yes.
Non-human. Okay, so you heard it here on UFO Man. Aliens are real. So there you go.
Non-human intelligence.
Non-humans.
Non-human,
Non-human.
non-human intelligence. I stand
Aliens
corrected.
are real. My dad was one, but he had a green card, so he was a legal alien.
I do have one last. I do have one last personal question for you. In your book, chapter 16, you write about your aha moment. Will you give a synopsis of this moment?
Yes, and that's a great question to leave on. I have unfortunately, I'm looking at my clock and it's now 8:01, and I'm being screamed at by. I have another engagement I have to do, but let me answer this for you because I think it's important. I was very busy at the time working a very specific project involving counterterrorism when a couple of the scientists broke into my office, almost literally broke into I had a vault in the middle of a skiff within the middle of a back. I mean, it was ridiculous the level of security I had in my office because of the work we were doing. And they came in and said, "Lou, we need to talk to you right now." And I said, "Well, guys, I'm kind of busy. Can we do this a little later?" And they said, "No, we got to do it now." I was like, "Well, okay, then now it is." So we walked into, I had a big conference room that I had in my office for discussions at the top secret level in the skiff. And for about 3 hours, he proceeded to write this very complex mathematical formula, which at the end, I got truthfully, a little frustrated. I said, "Guys, what the hell am I looking at here? I don't know." And he said, "Right here, this number here." And it says basically that up until this point in 2015, we had spent a lot of money trying to figure out all the separate different exotic technologies responsible for the 5 observables, the performance observables. And that's why we had the DIRT, the DIA research documents. They're all like, how is warp drive possible? How is low observability possible in stealth? And how is all this? And it turned out that every single one of those observables were possible if you had one capability, one technological capability. If you could do this one thing, then everything else was possible. And it had to do with gravity and insulating yourself from the natural effects of Earth's gravity and creating a bubble. And what some have described in the vernacular as a quote unquote warp bubble, or some have described as an Alcubierre drive. But in essence, that was the aha moment. That is what really, it was kind of like the universal law that really bridged between Newtonian physics and relativity and quantum mechanics. It was kind of that big aha moment for everybody. We just all sat back and go, wow. And it actually turned out that understanding even can describe now the shapes of the craft, why they are shaped the way they are shaped, believe it or not.
Right, round
Right.
rather than having right angles. Exactly. We want to let everybody know this is his book, Imminent: Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs.
Boy, they're going to be so mad at me for you plugging that book, man. My haters are going to be going apoplectic right now.
I really want
Apoplectic.
everybody to pick up a copy at Amazon. It's
a great read.
well worth
Really.
the read. I've read it almost twice now, and I'll probably read it again because the information is in depth. He is very thorough. Also, he has a YouTube channel. Here's his YouTube channel. Please go over there, sub, watch his videos, give him likes. Maybe you'll learn something new. Lou is trying to get the information out there. And like he said in his book, he works for the government. He tells the government what is happening. And the government's job is to tell us.
Mhm.
Right.
So we want to thank you very much for your work in the field, Lou. You know how much I respect you. And
well, I appreciate it, brother. But the reality is you all are doing most of the work. I'm just one person. You guys have created literally a movement. And it's beautiful to watch because each and every one of you in your own right are leading this movement. It's and every person that's watching this in the audience is also leading this movement. Anybody who sits there and has a conversation around the dinner table or around the water cooler at work, don't look now, but you're leading the movement. So my hat's off to you all for what you are doing. This is truly something. I've never seen anything like this. None of us are leading this. None of us are in charge. We're all working this together, shoulder to shoulder. And I am truly humbled and privileged to be part of this. And I mean it sincerely.
Thank you. Wish you could
Thank
stay
you so
after. We
much.
really did
Thank
you.
talk, but I get
We're
it.
gonna-
Absolutely.
We'll do it again, guys. I promise.
Thank
Forget
you.
All
we haven't
right.
done it
I
yet.
don't hold
Looking
you to
forward
that.
to it.
Okay,
Absolutely.
we thank you very much for your time, Lou, and everybody in chat. Thanks for watching. Everybody who participated online, thanks for watching, and we're out.
Thank you,
sir.
folks. Take care. Have a wonderful evening.